Yo, peoples, Kyushu92 here, and welcome to an analysis video, if you will. One of my viewers, yes, I'm Ramil, who has been here since I was doing solo leveling, was kind enough to send me a comment and ask me to do like a comparison between the light novel chapter of solo leveling, where Jin speaks to Ashborne for the first time, versus how it is in the 161st chapter of the Manhwa of solo leveling. And first, Ramil, my apologies for being so late making this video for you. I looked for your comment where you asked me to do this, and it was 5 days ago. I apologize for not getting this done and not getting this out to you sooner. So let's go ahead and get the analysis taken care of and see just what is different from the light novel versus the manhwa. A lot of people asked me to do an analysis of the entire series, but for right now, and I may do that in the future, for right now, we're going to do an analysis of the chapter in the light novel where Jin meets Ashborne for the first time, and versus what happens in the manhwa and all the things that may have been added or taken away in comparison. So let's get started, shall we? So I'm going to be reading from the light novel, and this is where Jin has taken care of the Jeju Island raid all on his own, and he's taken care of all the ant soldiers, and he's taken care of Beru, and he's raised them. And he says, right, and I'm reading from the light novel of it, and he says it hadn't been that long since he had seen his loyal soldier, but Jinwoo yearned to hear Beru's voice busily calling out to his king again. So he quickly shouted out towards the ants, "Rise up." When he did, shadow soldiers rose up from the shadows of every single ant he could see. Beru was among them too. "Oh, my king." Jinwoo took in the sight of several thousand ants kneeling all around him and slowly nodded his head. A brand new army was here, the new Shadow Army, starting from the most perfect state imaginable, swore their loyalty to their new master. However, after talking to his new soldiers, he became sure of it. Let's stop this. Even though a new Shadow Army had been created, there was this gaping hole in his heart that didn't want to fill back up. Beru looked up with worry, but Jinwoo knew that even that expression and emotion were all a lie. And that was why his heart ached even more so as he looked at his soldiers. Thick veins popped up in his throat as he shouted out, as he loudly yelled out. Sorry. I feel like I'm reading the solo leveling chapters all over again. Thick veins popped up in his throat as he loudly yelled out, "I know all of this is just an illusion. Why don't you stop this charade and reveal yourself?" This illusion was incredibly lifelike. Because of that, there had been some moments that he dearly wished for this thing to be his true reality. However, there was no hiding the emptiness in his heart that seemed to grow larger and larger the longer he spent inside this illusion. That was why. "Hurry up!" Jinwoo loudly roared into the empty sky above, before finally realizing that a change had taken place, that time had frozen still. The gazes of every single ant soldier and their raised heads were directed towards him. For a moment there, he felt goosebumps break out on his skin from receiving all those mechanical stares. It was then. Below his feet, the sovereign's territory, a jet-black shadow rapidly spread out. Everything touched by that shadow all vanished without exception. Beru, the soldiers, corpses, the ground, the sea, and finally even the sky itself. Soon the entire world became submerged in shadow. No, everything simply transformed into darkness instead. Only then did a weighty, heavy voice come at him from a place within this darkness. "As long as you want, you can live in this world for all eternity. It will be the same as you never waking from the most wonderful dream." Jinwoo searched for the voice coming from an unknown direction and made his reply. "Are you telling me to stay trapped within this illusion you created?"
No, I did not create this world. You are responsible for its creation.
I created this world? Jinwoo was about to reply with nonsense, but sensed something approach him. It was his rear. He quickly spun around. Sure enough, someone was walking closer from within the impenetrable darkness. This figure was knitted out in this exquisite black armor that no other shadow soldier could ever hope to match. And he also emitted an utterly shocking amount of pressure that no other living being Jinwoo ever met possessed. He found it hard to open his mouth when he came face to face with this figure. This being spoke to him.
This world was created when your desire to fix all the mistakes you've made so far were added to my own power. This place is the world of death, meaning this is my true territory.
Jinwoo finally realized then. He finally realized that this dark world he was standing in had been gently and invitingly embracing him all this time. So this is the eternal rest, is it? Death. If so, the man who claimed this world on the other side of consciousness as his territory had to be. Jinwoo wanted to hear the answer straight from the man's mouth and asked the question. And you might be? The man in the black armor slowly walked closer to Jinwoo.
I have been watching you for far longer than you can imagine. You who had always been striding close to death, yet always had been resisting bitterly against it.
You've been watching me? Eventually, the man stood right before Jinwoo and stared with those black eyes that seemed to suck in everything.
I am the record of your bitter struggle. I am the evidence of your resistance. I am the reward of your pain. I am death. I am eternal rest, and I am also terror.
Every word he spoke reverberated weightily within Jinwoo's soul. All those memories of him struggling hard to survive despite his weakness fleeted in and out of his mind like a revolving lantern. And let me read that again. All these memories of him struggling hard to survive despite his weakness fleeted in and out of his mind like a revolving lantern, and made his heart palpitate faster. I had to read that right. You'll have to forgive me. The figure reached down and grabbed Jinwoo's hand and placed it on his own armored chest. That's when Jinwoo's eyes widened in shock. He could definitely feel it beyond the thick metal plate. How could he not recognize it? How could he not recognize the vigorous pounding of the heart that he always got to hear by concentrating just a little bit harder? How could he not recognize the sounds of his second heart, the one where he had no clue where it was beating from? It was the black heart. The black heart was powerfully beating within this armored figure chest.
I am.
The figure quietly finished his words.
You.
And that's the end of chapter 218 of the light novel. So now we transition over to the manhwa. So I'm reading from Ashura Scans, which is where I was reading the massive majority of the chapters of Solo Leveling. So from here, the whole chapter just revolves around Jin getting impaled through the chest. It begins with him in chapter 161. It begins with Jin getting impaled through the chest by the Beast Monarch. The Frost Monarch taking his dagger that was frozen by the Frost Monarch and stabbing it in Jin's chest, saying, "All right, can you heal like you did earlier? I would like to return your weapon to you." And during this chapter, he's saying, "Probably not." He had an accent. "All right, can you heal like you did earlier? Probably not. No matter how strong you're not a complete monarch. Is this as far as you go, human? If that is the case, you will not be able to witness it the moment our armies set foot in this world. When that happens, there will be a mountain of human corpses, and their blood will form endless rivers. But this country, which you grew up in, will be different. I shall personally freeze every single human in this country myself, and make them suffer through an eternal agony. They will have to live through an eternity, not being able to die or live. So show me your endless contempt for me within your death. That will also be part of my joy. And as he's saying this, Jin is being frozen. I'm going to skip ahead because it pretty much goes through, unlike the light novel here, and if I'm looking at this correctly, unlike the light novel, it really doesn't go over. It really doesn't go over unless it goes to the previous chapter. But going through the light novel, it goes through saying that player's HP has reached 0, player has died. Then the message of player has died starts to fizzle out and glitch out, and it says, player is in possession of the Black Heart. You have met all the requirements for passive skill unknown. Then it shows his skill level, his tenacity level 1, advanced dagger arts max, quicksilver max, bloodlust level 2, stealth max. Passive skill unknown has been activated, and then unknown is highlighted finally after all that time. And then it starts to overtake all the other skills and it starts to shine brightly. Then there's this massive light, and Jin wakes up in his hospital bed, where time has pretty much reset to the moment where he apparently awakened in the story. And that was directly after the events of the double dungeon with the god statue at the beginning of the series. And it just recounts over Jin's adventures, including him talking to Gogun Hee, saying like he's the only one that can take on the Jeju Island raid, all the events that transpired, all the orcs he's defeated, the friends he's made, healing his mother, taking down all the ants. And then we come to the moment where Jin is directly in front of Beru. So let me go down here, where he raises Beru. And then, unlike the light novel, there is no mention of the system existing at all, or system notifications or anything like that. So, because right here it just says like you go a little bit higher up the page of chapter 218 of the light novel, and it's just Jin talking to Gogun Hee saying, I can take care of all the ants on Jeju Island. Didn't Gogun Hee once say that doing so was his life's wish? The older man was about to chide Jinwoo for being immature and reckless, but after seeing the resolute expression on Jinwoo's face, his own expression quickly changed as well. Are you being serious? Jinwoo nodded his head. This is something only I can do. Please leave it to me. And then it just skips ahead to Jin taking down the ants. Jin took a long, sweeping look at the corpses of ants strewn from about one end of the land all the way to the other side, and he looked below his feet where Beru, the Ant King's corpse, was resting quietly. It hadn't been that long since he'd seen his loyal soldier, but Jin Yu yearned to hear Beru's voice bustling to call out his king again. There is no mention of the system, or like these little notifications that says, would you like to restart the world? Which is something that you've seen multiple times during chapter 161 of the Manhwa. But there's no mention of it in the light novel. So there's the stark differences between those two. The whole notifications that pop up, I'm not seeing any mention of them in the light novel. So there's that difference right there. So then it cuts to Jin, and he's blowing his breath out, and he says, why don't you stop this? I know that all of this is an illusion, so stop this charade and reveal yourself. How much longer are you planning to look down on me from above? Jin doesn't say, how much longer are you planning to look down on me from above in the light novel. He just says, I know this is, why don't you stop the charade and reveal yourself? But in the light novel, he says, hurry up. But he doesn't say, how much longer are you planning to look at me from above? So in the Manhwa, everything turns dark. Then more of those notifications, would you like to restart the world, start popping up. Those don't happen in the light novel. And then they all just fill the room here on the Manhwa side. They just fill the room where Jin is standing and it surrounds him. And then Jin just says, who are you? But Jin doesn't say, who are you? Nor does he say, are you the king of the dead in this chapter? And that's chapter 61. So going into chapter 62 is when we have the further conversation. Are you the king of the dead? He doesn't say, are you the king of the dead in the light novel. Though in the light novel, we don't get this exquisite art of Ashborne walking out of the darkness towards him. So this is chapter 161. Chapter 161 and chapter 162 covers pretty much the chapter 218 of the light novel. But Ashborne says if you wanted to, you could live in this world for an eternity. So there's kind of similarities here. There are similarities because he says if you wanted to, you could live in this world for eternity. It would be like never waking up from the most wonderful dream. So there's similarities between these same sentences, so there's not too much discrepancy between them to say that they are starkly different. They both pretty much say the same thing here. And then Jin says, are you telling me to be trapped within this illusion you've created? And those are the same lines he utters in the light novel, so those are the same. And then the exact same words, no, I did not create this world, you're responsible for its creation, is exactly as it says in the light novel. So they're both the same there. And he says, I created this world, that's the same. It's a world created by combining your desire to correct your mistakes up until now, together with my power. And then he says, in other words, this is my territory. In the light novel, he says, this world was created where when your desire to fix all the mistakes you've made so far were added to my own power. This place is the world of death, meaning this is my true territory. So the difference is, in the Manhwa, he says, this is the eternal rest, death. So it kind of spreads out a little bit. Because as he's saying this, he takes on the different visages of all the other people that Jin has encountered. And he says, in other words, this is my territory. This is the eternal rest, death. So not an all one big massive sentence like it shows over here, but it's kind of spread out to, more emphasize it visually for the Manhwa. And he says, I've been watching you for far longer than you could possibly imagine. So the difference is, the thing is, Jin actually says some other things, and he says, and you must be. But Jin says those words at the beginning where Ashborne is coming out of the darkness to introduce himself, versus saying this after Ashborne has said, this is my territory, this is the eternal rest, this is death. He says this before Ashborne does this in the Manhwa. And it's further down in the light novel where he says, I am the record of your bitter struggle. I am the evidence of your resistance. I am the reward of your pain. I am death. I am eternal rest. And I am also terror. But before then, he says, I have been watching you for far longer than you can imagine. You have always been striding close to death, yet always had been resisting bitterly against it. So he kind of says the same thing here, but he says, yet so desperately resisted against it, rather than always been resisting bitterly against it. I am the record of your struggle, the evidence of your resistance, and the reward of your sufferings versus reward of your pain. Just little minor word differences. I am death, I am eternal rest, as well as terror. So I kind of like how he says, I am death, I am eternal rest, as well as terror. Like, you could say, I am death, I am eternal rest, and I am also terror. But I like him saying as well as terror, because it kind of carries on the sentence a little bit more than just saying, I am. So I kind of like it here in the Manhwa. And then he says, I am you. And then in the Manhwa, it shows Ashborne taking on the visage of Jin before Jin was ever awakened, as, pre-awakened Jin. So the differences between these pages, the most striking difference between these chapters of the light novel and the chapters of the Manhwa is that it doesn't really mention anything of the system and its notifications popping up like, would you like to restart the world? Because if I go to the previous chapter, in chapter 217, I'm looking, and it makes no mention of it. The designated target can't be called back. I see level up messages of 217. So it does still have like the system messages of like player has died, players in possession of the black heart, you have met all the requirements for passive skill. The difference between the chapter where Ashborne is speaking to Jin and he explains what he is, there's no mention of the would you like to restart the world. Because I feel like this is more of an angle for people who are looking at the manhwa and are thinking like, and it gives this representation like all is not as it seems. Would you like to restart the world? All the events that Jin was going through in his life and everything happening with Jin. There's no mention of this. Would you like to restart the world? Because I feel like the manhwa does this in a way to say like everything is not okay, everything is not fine. But would you like to restart the world to see if you can have like a different outcome? Because this is kind of catering to Jin's mind and desires. Versus in the light novel, it doesn't mention any of this restart the world. Jin already knows that something is off. He doesn't need the notification popping up, would you like to restart the world over and over? Nor does it mention that it encircles him leading up to Ashborne's reveal. So there's none of that. There are still the system notifications of him leveling up, his skills leveling up, and the resounding notifications concerning that. But there's none of that, would you like to restart the world, or any of those little options there. But there's kind of some differences here and there. Some words are different from the light novel to the manhwa, but the meanings are still the same. The only major difference is that some of the little subtle additions, such as like I said, the would you really like to restart the world notification, that's something that's been added on and tacked on. The difference, really the main difference of the manhwa from the light novel is that there's more ways to convey what the light novel does in words. Whereas it doesn't mention that Ashborne is changing his visage into all the people from Jin's past while he's speaking to him. There's no mention of him doing that, but in the manhwa, they go the extra mile to do like this real dramatic look of showing that Ashborne can become anyone that Jin knows in order to, drive this message home that I've seen everything that you've been through. This is the eternal rest. This is my territory. This is death. So I like the visual representation that they do in the manhwa versus the light novel where, sure, you could imagine all this stuff happening. But if you see this stuff drawn out in the manhwa, you can see like differences in how messages are being portrayed versus how they are in the light novel. Because sure, you can see everything being described in minute detail in a light novel, but there's some things that visually words can convey a little bit better than what happens in the light novel, which is why I really like the manhwa, because there's certain things that you can just see and you can already figure out what they are. And the visual representation can tell a story just as well as the written representation, which is why I like the manhwa just as much as the light novel. Now, I haven't read through the entire light novel itself, but I did this chapter just for Ramil. But I'm very appreciative because I'm a visual type person. I'm very appreciative of when images can convey what an entire paragraph can do. So that's what the manhwa does here in showing, the people that Jin has shown in the past while Ashborne is talking, letting him know that, hey, he can do basically anything in this territory. It just makes you think, like, if he can make himself look like any of his family members, what else can he do in this domain? Like, it kind of gives you that thought. Not saying that the light novel doesn't do that, but the manhwa visually can put those thoughts in your head and give you more to think about visually, and give you also more to think about mentally. Whereas the light novel, you can read it, you can kind of imagine it, but with the manhwa, you have something to link to that imagination. That's what I like. That's what I really like. That's the reason why the manhwa is, ranked up there for me, because you have something to link that imagination to. When you're thinking about it, you can link it back to the images and then kind of use those images to further that imagination versus the light novel where you have to imagine all these things going on. So there's kind of the differences here and there. Sorry if I kind of sounded a little bit long-winded, but I kind of wanted to cover my bases on how I thought of the differences between the light novel and the manhwa, and I can see now that the manhwa appeals to me more due to the fact that I have something I can link my imagination to, and then my imagination can take off from the images I see that I link the story to. That's just me personally. Not everyone may feel that way, but when it comes to imagining things, sometimes if I have something that I can link to my imagination can then just vastly branch off if I have an image linked to it. Say, for instance, if I were to read about Jin and they don't really describe how he looks physically or anything like that, I could just basically imagine anything. And it could either be close to what I imagined or very far off. But with the manhwa and having a visual representation of what I'm reading, I have something that my mind and imagination can link to. Therefore, anything I imagine from that point on will be linked to that one specific image that branches off from that. Think of Jin Woo. I can think of him as either like his younger self when he was pre-awakened or after when he was awakened later on. I can think of everything that's linked to Jin, to his face, to his visage, to his figure, everything. And I can link it towards that. And my imagination can branch off from that one image. And now I have something to anchor my imagination to, thanks to the visual representation. Which is why I like manga. Sure, I could read light novels all day. I could read chapter books all day. But sometimes it doesn't hurt to have a visual anchor to link your imagination to, so you can have something to pivot off of. So you can have something to take root and then just branch off of. Something that can take root and then grow into more imaginative thoughts. That's just how I feel personally, which is why I really like the manhwa, because at least I got something that I can link my mind to and then just branch off from there, from the visual representation and the visuals and the thoughts. Because in the light novel, sure, they could have described Ashborne in this exquisite black armor that no other soldier can have. But looking at the armor in the manhwa of Ashborne and his entire visage, how hulking he is, his cape flowing behind him, his hair flowing and flame-like in the wind, his glowing eyes underneath his mask, his massive breastplate and his exquisite designs all over him. That's something my mind can link to and will never forget because of how awesome it looks. So that's just my opinion. That's just my little video of the difference between chapter 218 of the light novel of Solo Leveling and chapters 161 and 162 of the manhwa of Solo Leveling. And I hope you guys enjoyed my analysis and how I thought of these series as a whole, because let's just face it, Solo Leveling is an amazing series. The light novel is great, and the manhwa is great as well. And I'm looking forward to more moments where I can talk about it. So, Ramil, this is for you. Hope you enjoyed it. Hope I was able to cover all your bases. If not, we can cover it again in like a live stream or whatever, where we can talk about it a little bit more when I have the time. But other than that, that's all I got for this analysis of the specific solo leveling chapters. So with that being said, hope you all enjoyed. Can't wait to see you all in my next video. And if you're new to the channel and you enjoyed what you saw here today, then consider subscribing or consider becoming a member, because I am always looking forward to entertaining you. So have a fantastic day. And once again, as always, later, peoples.